5.
Mid-January. And so I just
first 90 days.
Now I'm just kind of
But
been up way too late.
go up to 275 and go back to facilities.
So we'll see.
Cool.
Is that did you like it? How's it going with you and Ren?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't create any of it.
Exciting.
I got someone to do it for me, so I don't.
Yeah, I started looking at this last year.
Send it to me, I create.
So I
Kind of just settled into like this structure.
Working out.
Making me raise.
Are you, how's your financing?
Yeah, it turns out it's pretty good.
Owner carry?
Bank financing, 75.
It's the best I can do. Sorry, I'm gonna get us started, you guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You're a little far, Suzanne.
Cool.
A little far away.
Nope, there you go.
Okay. All right, you guys. I don't want to cut off the networking, but there's always time afterward as well to connect with folks in the room. But we've got guest speakers here joining us from all over the country. So we are a cross-country group today, which is super awesome. And we are starting a new series this year called Build Your Team. So this is the first event in that series, and we're bringing in vendors, we're bringing in attorneys, we're bringing in insurance people, because all these people are the important folks that you need to have on your real estate team. But we thought it would be really cool to start with the end in mind at the beginning of the year, which is, these people I think aren't always like, I don't want to say you get overlooked, but the closing team, your creative closers are some of the most important people to have on your team. And that's what Sarah and I do in our real estate business, is connect you with the right people for your deals, for your investment properties or your purchases or sales. And so we wanted to bring together some awesome rock star folks that we have worked with personally and professionally across the country to really give you the folks that you need to have to close the types of deals that you want to do. So we know not everyone is doing, the uber creative things. Sometimes we just have, vanilla deals, and that's great. And sometimes we have things that are wild and hairy and tricky, and so we have folks that do kind of both and that span that whole spectrum. So we're excited to bring to you a rock star escrow agent, Sabrina Norton, who's sitting in the front seat. Hey, Sabrina, and we'll give you a chance to introduce yourself. And then we've got Rick Wetstone, who is joining with us all the way from North Carolina. And he is an attorney, a real estate attorney and in North Carolina and South Carolina, you use closing attorneys versus escrow agents. So it's just a different way of closing things. So if you're investing across the country like Sarah and I have, you'll work with a variety of different people. And so closing attorneys, escrow agents, everything in between, you'll have these great people on your team. So the reason Rick is here is because I have bought 2 subject to deals in North Carolina and used his company to close those deals. And they're really well versed in subject to and land trusts and all these things that we hear about. So I've done some of them, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert yet, but I'm learning as I go along. So that was a long intro, but just wanted to introduce the idea and the concept. And so just most of you, I think almost all of you know Sarah and I, but we're realtors. Sarah's sitting in the front on the other side. Give a wave, Sarah. And yeah, so we're realtors. Obviously, those of you sitting in our office are in our lovely space. I am not there. I think many of you know I spend winters in Baja, so that is where I'm joining you right now. And yeah, we're both investors. So we've done, between the two of us, I don't know how many deals for ourselves, but Sarah was invested in St. Louis. I've got stuff in North Carolina, Michigan, and Baja, in addition to Oregon, and Sarah as well. Anything you want to add, Sarah?
Yeah, no, I mean, just a lot of people ask us what we're selling when we're here, and we just want to be really clear that we're selling community and connection here. And yes, we're licensed agents, and it's our hope that you think of us and give us the opportunity to help you when you do conventional and non-conventional transactions here in the state of Oregon. But other than that, we're really just excited to have you here and get to know each other and connect.
Yes. And another way to stay connected with us is with this QR code here on the screen. So we have our weekly Real Deal newsletter that we send out to over 500 subscribers. And what we do is we scour the real estate market in Central Oregon and even sometimes Southern Oregon and send out the best investment deals that we find every single week. So we do video tours of properties. We feature, I can't say that every week we have like, the best deal of the year. But we have definitely found some winners and been able to bring these deals to people directly, either through our newsletter or otherwise. So if you want the real deal coming to you every single week, you can get on our mailing list and hear our funny, candid commentary. I actually wrote a poem last week in our newsletter because nobody ever buys midterm rentals from us, and they just kind of like sit at the bottom of our emails. So anyways, I am committed. We are going to sell one of you or someone in our community. We're going to sell a midterm rental, and that's what my haiku was about. So enough about my poetry. Let's talk about the agenda. And I also have to get, I try to write it all myself, but ChatGPT did help me with the haiku. So just giving credit where credit's due. All right, so we'll do some intros in a second. Just want to walk you through quickly what we'll be talking about today. So the first thing with both of our creative closers is how they work with investors and what investors' unique needs are. We'll also talk about land trusts, which are called revocable trusts in Oregon. So a lot of us that are investors, we hear these terms, and then, like my experience in Oregon was like, okay, I need a land trust for my properties. And everyone in Oregon was like, what are you talking about? So I wanted to clarify what that actually means. Revocable trust in Oregon. Buying subject to existing mortgages. So that's something that's a hot topic. I know there's an event happening in Bend this evening specific to that topic as well. So I'm sure some of you in the room are going to that event. And then some tricky seller financing and creative deal structures. So I know Sabrina has helped us with some of those. And then just talking through some of the common investor mistakes that our escrow agents and escrow team and the closing attorneys see frequently, and then some pro tips and deals learned the hard way. And then the other thing that is on the very near horizon is something called FINCEN. I actually don't even know what that stands for, but it's something about anti-money laundering. And I know both Rick and Sabrina are experts in this, so we'll let them talk about what that means for creative closing, because it's coming in March and it's going to affect some of the things we're talking about today, specifically land trusts, buying in LLCs, and the reporting requirements associated with those things, and reducing the ability to stay anonymous as investors, which has been the goal of some of those structures. So I won't steal their thunder, but we'll just do some intros. So let's just go around the room. Sarah, you want to start us off in the room with somebody?
Yeah, let's start with Corey right here.
Hey, I'm Corey Hansen. I am also an investor looking forward to getting more details on creative financing deals. Been under contract on a sub 2 before and it fell through, so I'm just trying to get more experience with the creative side of things. I have some investments in the Midwest and one rental here.
Nice.
Chris King, mostly investing in mobile home parks in the Midwest right now.
Awesome.
I'm Dave Budnick, local investor, and have some stuff scattered across the U.S., duplexes, a small mobile home park, and we're building a memory care mansion in Redmond.
Grady Webster, long-term investor with a few different properties.
I'm Caitlin Dunley. I have a short-term rental property management company called Soul Path Properties, and I'm looking to buy my first investment property for myself this year.
Yay.
I'm Jessica Copley. I'm a newly licensed agent in last year. And then I'm also an investor. I purchased a sub 2 property and look to get more this year and just continue growing and learning from Suzanne and Sarah.
Sabrina Norton, escrow officer at First American. I'm not an investor, but I can help you with paperwork.
I'm Darren Hillier. I'm a state underwriter for First American. I work with Sabrina. She brought me here to make sure she doesn't say anything that she's not supposed to. I've been in the industry for a long time, 25 years or so. I'm not an attorney, but pretend to be a lot of the times. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for introducing yourselves. Let's start online. We've got Cynthia. Welcome back. You're on mute. There you go.
Cynthia. Yeah, I just like to come to these meetings and just learn more about real estate and get motivated to find another property. We started investing in Portland back in the early 2000s and had 6 properties, and now we're just down to 2 duplexes. So I'd like to get back into the game sometime soon.
Yes, excellent. Well, we're glad you're here. Gabby, welcome.
Hi, yes. So I'm a real estate agent out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and I have an Airbnb in Mooresville, North Carolina that I'm trying to sell. And so I'm just looking for creative ways to do my next investment.
Excellent. Thanks for joining. I love it. We got people in other states. Jason, welcome.
Hello, my name is Jason. I'm currently in Massachusetts, and Sarah and Suzanne are helping me relocate to Redmond shortly. So my goal is to attend these meetings, and my intention is to hopefully purchase a property, kind of starting out brandy new, and maybe within the next year to year and a half. So until then, I'm here to learn.
Awesome. So glad you could join us today.
Thank you.
John, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. My name is John Tarantino, and I live in Bend. I'm in Carmel, California right now, just visiting some friends and family. And I have a investment property in Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, looking to get more into that market and into the Bend market and possibly some others. And as far as today's meetup, I just wanted to keep learning, and all these subjects are very much of interest to me. So looking forward to this. And thank you again, Sarah and Suzanne, for hosting. And you guys do a great job. And I always feel like I want to do more for you, but I'm sure we'll do a deal or something down the road here soon. So.
Oh, thank you, John. Well, thank you also for bringing us a couple bottles of wine last year. That was really sweet.
That's nothing. That's nothing.
That's great. Taryn, good to see you.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. So many familiar faces in that room. I wish I could be there in person. I am a dispositions manager for a wholesale company here in Central Oregon, and also a multifamily investor here. I'm currently looking for more creative deals, so seller finance or sub 2. I'm pretty open on what that looks like, possibly wanting to move my primary as well. But I'm just happy to be here. It's been a while since I've been to one of these, so I'm excited to see all of you guys and hopefully see most of you at the Creative Nation tour tonight.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Did I miss anybody?
I don't think so.
No? Okay. Super. All right. Well, who do you call when your deal goes sideways? You call Sabrina and Rick. So Sabrina, I know you did a quick intro, but tell us a little more.
Right now. Well, I'm wearing that outfit right now, so that's fun. So I've been with First American for this year will be my 21st year. I started working at First American right out of college as an assistant, and then just built my way up. I graduated from the University of Oregon and moved over here.
if a job was ever made for me, this was it. I love people. I love busy work. I love helping. I love being creative. My role, though, as an escrow officer is to solely work off of instruction. But I love being able to like help people figure out ways to get to the closing table. So, and then that's where, you know, I get to loop in, you know, my title department and Darren sometimes. Like there is stuff that we have to deal with and creative things that we have to deal with to try to, you know, get around issues that pop up on a title report or, you know, there's a lot of stuff and we work as a team so that you guys, Sarah, like don't know that we have an issue that we need to work through. So, yeah, we do a lot. I'm a dog lover. I don't have any kids. I'm also a fitness instructor and my husband's a handyman. So if you guys ever need someone, he's great and I can give you his info.
I love it. So good. And so I just want to clarify, like you're a neutral third party, and Rick, I know you're going to introduce yourself. Do you have the same role as a neutral third party, or as a real estate attorney, are you representing only one side?
Yeah, so it depends. In North Carolina, more of the representation comes on the buyer side because we are obviously handling the title search, everything like that. And then seller side is more just document preparation. Whereas in South Carolina, we represent both sides of the transaction. We can do that because it's not a conflict of interest since both sides are wanting the same thing to complete the transaction. So that's kind of how we structure it. And that's why we don't really create any contracts for the parties involved either, just because, you know, that could be seen as one side or the other on a representing one party over the other more so. So it's both sides of the transaction we handle, you know, document preparation more so on the seller side, and then buyer side is making sure title is clear, and then handling the documents if they need prepared for that, as well as, you know, any questions either side has on those documents.
Okay. Yeah. So a little bit nuanced based on which state you're working in. And it's different.
I know. I mean, like most states you're going to run into for people that invest all over the country. I think there's only 7, if my memory serves correctly, that require an attorney. Most states are going to be you use a title company or an escrow officer to handle that. There's only about 7 states that require an attorney to be handled. North and South Carolina are 2 of them.
Oh, okay. Good to know. Excellent. All right. Well, this is me just kind of Q&A and, you know, want you and Sabrina to kind of talk through some of the nuances that you have working with investors. So I'll just open it up to, Rick, maybe you want to start here.
Yeah, I mean, so we deal with, you know, subject to transactions, you know, investors, individuals that are assigning properties, double closings to where, you know, they purchase it and then they might sell it later on or, you know, shortly thereafter. So that's a lot of what we work with. At the end of the day, you know, there's a lot of attorneys that know a lot of those structures. You know, for example, like I said, our 2 states in North and South Carolina require an attorney. A lot of them don't understand the subject to aspect of things to where, you know, essentially it's similar to if somebody comes in and, you know, a son or a daughter might take, you know, buy the property from their parents, but they keep that mortgage in place. Very similar to that, but you were just as a outside third party coming in and purchasing the property and not paying off that mortgage. So you will come in and make those payments on behalf of the seller. It really depends on a lot of circumstances, whether or not that fits for a seller. You know, a lot of situations to where the person is going to be going into foreclosure or is already in foreclosure is something that works for really well, to where their credit may be impacted by the fact that they've missed some payments. You know, it can be beneficial for a seller in that situation because as you make those payments as a buyer, it actually helps the credit of the seller because you're making those payments on their behalf. Compared to, you know, somebody that has great credit and a bunch of equity in their home that might not fit for their particular circumstances. But, you know, we see a lot of situations where they're in pre-foreclosure or in foreclosure. Somebody comes in and, you know, allows them to get out of that foreclosure process, you know, reinstates the loan, takes over those payments, and then, you know, puts some money in their pocket to move on and, you know, find a place that they can stay in. So, you know, we have a lot of situations that are like that.
Yeah. And that's how I ended up getting both of my North Carolina ones. The one I just purchased was the seller was like $4,000 or $5,000 behind in her payments on her mortgage. She was a couple $1,000s behind on her payments to her HOA, you know, so she was basically like ready to walk away. Her tenants had moved out and hadn't told her, you know, she was done. She wanted enough money to be able to pay her kids' college tuition for this year. And so that was the walkaway money that I provided her in this deal, and also got those 2 accounts caught up so that they're current and so that her credit, you know, looks good on the mortgage and everything is caught up with the HOA. So that's just an example of like how that played out for me with this property.
Yep. And that's pretty standard for what we run into is, you know, individuals like that to where they want to get out of the situation that they're in, and somebody could step in and, you know, it's not a situation that they want to have the property sit on the market for 7 months and bring the most money possible with a realtor. They want that property sold next week. Otherwise, it's going to be lost at foreclosure before they can actually sell it, you know, with a traditional realtor and a traditional buyer. So, you know, that's a situation that really works for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Sabrina, in your experience, you know, what do you feel like investors need from you that's different from a primary home buyer?
It's hard for me because I completely work off of like a contract that you guys write up as real estate agents. So I would say it's important to work with an escrow officer that like knows what they're doing and knows what questions to ask once they get that real estate contract in hand. Because if I get something that just doesn't look right on like the seller carry addendum that you guys have to do, then, you know, I'm going to call it out and I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to be like, is this what you actually want to do? Or say like, actually, you can't do this. One thing I want to point out is I'm actually not allowed to prepare any closing documents that have to do with a wrap or a contract of sale. So there's 2 different types of seller carry transactions that you can do. One is a promissory note and a deed of trust, which is just like a buyer goes to a bank, you get a loan, the property gets transferred into the buyer's name, and then the lender puts a lien on the property. So it's just like going to your seller, getting a loan from your seller, you're just using their equity. The seller deeds the property over to you as the buyer, and then the seller has a lien on the property. That's probably the most common seller carry transactions. And then there's Darren's.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like for a title insurer too, we like those. Those are very clean. They're very typical to a standard transaction. Normally for the buyer who's being insured as well, like they're frankly the safest route to go, but obviously not the only route to go, and sometimes not the most financially advantageous route to go. So then we get into higher risk transactions,
which is like a contract of sale. So that's where the seller remains in title on the property until the buyer pays off the loan that they're getting from the seller. They record what's called a memorandum of contract against the property so that the seller can't go out and sell or do anything with the property without the buyer knowing about it. Those are just documents that we have to refer to an attorney. And I actually think that there's OREF forms that you also can use. It's just something that we can't prepare because they're just higher risk transactions.
Yeah, in Oregon anyway.
In Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, we're
talking about Oregon.
Yeah, same here. Just Oregon knowledge. With contracts, you know, one of the big distinctions is, you know, the seller remains the fee owner of the property, and the buyer is just getting an equitable interest in the property. And so it's really important that the buyer understands the nuance behind that and understands that because the seller still owns a fee interest, they can still, in essence, encumber the property or suffer involuntary liens that can attach to the property. It's a higher, in my opinion, a higher risk scenario for a buyer to take on a contract. Another pitfall that I've seen happen is once that contract is fulfilled in Oregon, you get a fulfillment deed recorded. Sometimes getting that fulfillment deed can be difficult or problematic, especially if that seller, say, has passed away and their estate hasn't been probated or something along those lines. We find that come up a lot where it just trips up closing altogether because that fulfillment deed wasn't prepared previously and held. It needs to be prepared at closing, and we just don't have an estate available to take care of that. And I would also,
Go ahead.
no, please go. Yeah.
Rick and I were talking about that when we talked through our prep meeting. So Rick, do you want to talk about what you see a lot on the contract?
Yes.
Contract
so
for
I mean,
deed?
like we've seen a lot of those contract for deeds. They're more common in South Carolina, honestly, than in North. I personally different for obviously for each state. I do not like them. I feel like they have a lot of issues to come up with on the title side of things. So at least in North and South Carolina, when we do a title search, let's say somebody has a contract for deed. One, if the individual that's doing the contract for deed that's buying the property, let's just say they end up not buying it, they move out, and so the person then tries to sell, they do need to get that release signed. But if that individual that decided not to make payments and moved out, even if they sign that release, there's judgments or liens that would attach to the property from that buyer because they do have that equitable interest. I personally do not like that. I think that hurts the person that's trying to sell. Or even on top of that, the person trying to buy, the individual that's the seller on the property. If they have a judgment that comes against them, an IRS lien that pops up for $100,000 before they end up going to sell or pay it off, that is now going to attach to that property and it's going to need to be paid. That could be something that, is unable to be paid by the seller and the person is not able to buy it without being paid off. So me personally, I like a situation in which you do a purchase and a seller financing route to where, you put X amount down, similar to what you would do for a contract for deed, but you are the owner of the property free and clear outside of that mortgage. And that way, if there is a judgment or anything like that against the seller, it doesn't attach to that property. They just have a lien on the property through a mortgage, and vice versa, to where if that buyer gets a judgment or a lien, you now have a first position mortgage to where you can go and foreclose on that property, and that first position mortgage is going to come over or cover over that judgment or lien against the buyer, through the foreclosure process, because they'll be named as defendant. So I personally think that's the best route to go. Obviously, each situation has different opportunities that apply to them better. I've had an individual that, they wanted to do a plat on the property and, see what it looks like after it's restructured, talk to the county, see how many, parcels they can place on a larger tract. That type of person, when they want to go through that whole process, but want it to be kind of under lock and key, they wanted to do a contract for deed. That made sense for them in that situation. But, your standard individual, I personally think the seller financing to where you actually purchase the property is the best route to go.
Okay. And I just want to clarify in case it's not clear for everybody. Contract for deed is oftentimes preferred by a seller because they still own the property. Like the title does not transfer into the buyer's name except with that memorandum of contract that only gets executed once the entire loan is paid off. So sellers oftentimes like this because then they don't have to go through the foreclosure process. They can just basically evict the person, the buyer that's not paying, for non-payment. But the risk is that judgments can attach either from the buyer or the seller to the property when it's in this contract for deed state. Am I explaining this correctly?
Yep, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yes.
and in Oregon too, there is still a statutory process you have to go through in order to basically expunge that contract from the record when you've evicted somebody. So you've got the practical action of evicting somebody, but then you still have to clear the record, and it's much more simple than a foreclosure. So it is better in that sense, but there is still a legal process you have to go through, hire an attorney, and go about it that way too. So it's not super clean. And I'm with Rick, contracts we don't see as often anymore. And that's frankly a really good thing.
Yep, I agree.
With the contract route, you guys were talking about how there can be an issue if someone passes away and someone hasn't prepared the deed. But are you saying that, because I know, Sabrina, we've done these with you a couple times, these contracts, and I know you prepare the deed ahead of time, obviously it's not, recorded. Are you saying that by preparing the deed ahead of time, that absolves any issues that may come along, but the issue you prepared, if there's issues that happen, it's still going to be an issue? Okay.
So Darren can.
Yeah, it's a matter of when the document's recorded, right? So that person can't sell a property. So that still could be potentially an issue where we need now a new fulfillment deed prepared. Okay. Now, from a title insurance standpoint, we have ways of getting outside of requiring a formal probate or a small estate, simple estate to be filed. Sometimes we rely on what's called an affidavit of heirship, where we can get a level of comfort of who the heirs of that decedent are to have them convey out property. And I'm sure it's very different state to state, but for Oregon, there's ways for us to get through it. But those things make otherwise what we thought would be a quick closing into something that's going to maybe take a little bit longer and be a little bit more problematic. I would also bring up too, I mean, I think they're kind of similar to contracts, lease options. That's just another, creative way of going about it. I mean, really, it's a tenant landlord relationship. What I find from the title standpoint, a lot of times lease options are not of record. We learn about them through word of mouth. They don't record these memorandum of leases. And again, those are similar to contracts where, again, you don't own the property. You're just a landlord for a while until you actually exercise the right to purchase. So I won't go too much into that, but that's just one we didn't bring up that I thought would be good.
Yeah,
that's great. That'll actually be our topic for next month. We're going to talk about lease options. So stay tuned if you're interested in buying on lease option or selling on lease option, because there's some unique opportunities to be had with that. Okay, well, we've jumped ahead and around, and it's great. So I'm going to try to find the right place in our presentation. I do just want to talk about this. I know, Sabrina, you said you don't prepare paperwork, totally get that, but Rick does. So Rick, will you talk about some of the docs that you do create for these transactions?
Absolutely. Yep. So, depending on the particular transaction, for example, seller financing, we will prepare a promissory note. Deed of trust would be for North Carolina. A mortgage would be for South. And, then if we do the subject to, we also have documents that we prepare for that. We have a set of documents to where there's also a similar deed of trust or mortgage that is from the buyer promising to make those payments on behalf of the seller for the mortgage that they have taken over. And they also sign a note similar to that to combine it. So that just gives the seller a little added protection to where, let's say, now obviously it's a second position. It's not, anything special for the mortgage foreclosure aspect, but it does give the seller some protection to where if that buyer doesn't decide to make those payments, they can then go ahead and say, we're going to foreclose against you in that second position mortgage. And oftentimes that'll lead the buyer to want to, deed the property back to the seller. Or get back on payments, make sure that everything's going according to plan, how it should be with the subject to transaction. So we prepare all those documents in association with each transaction that's needed for each type.
Got it. Yeah. And I remember a lot of those documents and like a few CYA documents in there as well.
Yes. So we have a CYA towards like, hey, listen, the mortgage lender could technically call the note due. That's one of the standard just risks of a subject to transaction. In every deed of trust or mortgage that's recorded, at least in North Carolina and South Carolina, I'm going to guess all the way around the country, there is a due on sale clause in that deed of trust or mortgage that says if the property is sold to another party, typically there's a caveat in that for a trust that deals with, if the seller is the beneficial interest of the trust. But that outside of that caveat, the lender does have the capability to foreclose based on that due on sale clause. So they could say full amount is now due. If the individual is not able to pay the full amount, they can initiate the foreclosure proceeding. Typically, if that happens, it is very rare in a subject to transaction, just because, as long as the payments are continuing to be made, same reason why, after you go through the whole mortgage loan process and they make sure you have income employment, nothing's changed all the way up until you sign. If 2 weeks later you lose your job, they are not then going to come back and take the house as long as you keep making those payments. So as long as they're continuing to be made, payments are made and the mortgage lender is being paid, they're usually good to go and proceed and move forward. But it does happen occasionally. So in those situations, that's when the note is called due. And the buyer has a few options in that situation. They could deed the property back to the seller, in which they're then back on title. They can refinance, pay off that mortgage lender, or they could sell the property and pay off that mortgage lender. So essentially, either deed it back or pay off that loan.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure everyone is following along. We sort of skipped ahead, and those are some of the nuances of the subject to purchases. So when you're buying a property subject to an existing mortgage, which is what tonight's event in Bend is all about, is just talking about, how to buy with less cash out of pocket generally. And Are there any questions? Because we got kind of deep onto subject to, and I know that's what a lot of people are interested in, just because, you know, you can get those 2.5%, 3.5% interest rates that we probably won't see again in our lifetimes using these informal assumptions or buying subject to. So any questions in the room about that piece or online? No, everyone's got it. Cool. Okay. Okay. Good deal. Well, then let's talk about land trusts. And again, this is going to be, I think, Sabrina, you've probably done some of this stuff too, but let's just talk about it first from North Carolina. You know, the land trust word in the investor community, or this term is used a lot. So I'm just curious, what can you tell us, Rick, about like, why do people want them? Like, what are the benefits of them? What are the drawbacks, and how would someone go about creating a land trust?
Yeah, so that's for the last question. We can create a land trust document for an individual. You know, we don't see it a ton so much anymore. And I personally, I know you have this at the end of this thing, but FINCEN, I personally think, you know, you won't see it very often at all, if not ever. You know, some of the benefits would be the anonymity that comes with it, to where, you know, it kind of different between North and South Carolina. So North Carolina, you just list the name of the trust as the buyer. Whereas in South Carolina, you have to actually list the trustee and the name of the trust. So it kind of takes away a little bit from that anonymity. So we see it a lot less in South Carolina, but it does allow for a sense of anonymity. Investors will use those a lot, you know, just placing the property into a trust for that anonymity, you know, just to not have it into an LLC that they personally have, or have the LLC as the trustee and then themselves as the beneficiary. You know, there's a lot of reasons that people, you know, go that route. Anonymity probably being the number one of that. I personally just don't see the benefit of it. I think that, you know, if you're going to buy, you know, in a sub 2, a lot of people will say, well, let's do the land trust, because as I stated earlier, there is that one caveat in the due on sale clause for a trust. The problem is, a lot of people back in the day, what they would do is they place the property into a trust and have the seller as the beneficiary of that trust. And then they would deed, or essentially transfer, the beneficial interest to themselves after closing. Well, the problem with that is the entire intent of that concept is to defraud the lender. If they would ever come forward and say the due on sale clause, they would have the original trust showing the seller as the beneficiary. And that's the intent, to defraud the lender. The due on sale clause is not that big of a deal. I mean, obviously you have to pay off the mortgage. Fraud is something you don't want to deal with against the lender. So I personally do not like them. I think that's something that's just not needed. Again, you know, the due on sale clause is a rarity in a subject to transaction. I've seen a little bit more of it happen with some smaller banks, but for the most part, you know, it is still a rarity. And at the end of the day, you know, anytime you transfer the property, they could do that due on sale clause, just pay it off. But I personally don't think the trusts are needed. And, you know, we see some people that still like a land trust for the anonymity purpose. But for the most part, we don't do a lot with them.
Okay. And Sabrina, I know, I mean, when I look on county records all the time, like I see so many homes in such and such family revocable trust or random name revocable trust. So will you talk to us a little bit of, you know, that's the equivalent of a land trust in Oregon. Why do people close in a revocable trust?
So I'll talk about the revocable trust piece, but the reason I brought Darren is because actually I saw the land trust slide and I was like, I don't even know what a land trust is, and I've been doing this for 21 years. So but we actually, I was just looking at Darren's notes, and those are two totally separate things in our world. So revocable trust wise, that is like the best way that you can protect your family if you were to pass away or become incapacitated. I literally deal with them every single day of my life, and we love them. So if a property is vested in a trust and one of the trustees has passed away or is incapacitated, it's so easy to figure out because the trust is what owns the property. You just have an authorized signer essentially for the trust. So once that trustee, that initial authorized signer, can't sign anymore, you just go right down to the successor trustee that they've named, and that person has full authority to sign on behalf of the trust. That's why we love them. It alleviates your property having to go through probate if you pass away. It's just so much cleaner and so nice for your family. So land trust, No clue.
That's okay. It's a different, it accomplishes the same similar thing from my understanding is like, at least for investors and, even for people that just want to have anonymity, they close, or put a property into a random name trust, revocable trust, just so people can't go on Dial like we do and sleuth their names. And, Dial is our county records system, Rick, just
Okay.
I do a ton of Dial sleuthing by names, and when it's in a revocable trust or a trust, like you just can't do that. It's not as easy to track it down. So you get a bit of the anonymity with that piece as well. Darren, were you going to say something?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, just to carry on what Sabrina's saying, again, like we look at revocable trusts, they're very common. My property's in a trust. I mean, it's just an estate planning tool. That's really all it is. But like Rick was saying, typically you are the trustee of your own trust, and then you've got beneficiaries, maybe they're your kids or whatever. Land trust we look at as being sort of that risky scenario that Rick was just talking about as well, where you are trying to create anonymity. Maybe you've got someone else as the trustee of the trust, but the beneficiary is the seller or you or whatever, and you're trying to kind of shield things from the lender to prevent that due on sale clause. And that's where we as title insurers, like we very rarely welcome land trusts in the term that I'm meaning it from a title insurance standpoint, because even though we're not insuring against loan acceleration or anything along those lines, we don't want to get involved in post-litigation matters at all, especially involving lenders who've got a solid legal standing or solid legal ground to argue fraud that might have occurred with the land trust. So revocable trusts, they're great. They're just a wonderful estate planning tool. Sure, you can name your trust whatever you want to name it. You can appoint someone else to be the trustee of your trust if you're trying to create that anonymity. But normally those are going to be estate planning tools as opposed to like, investment financing tools where you're trying to short circuit what the legal rights of the lender are when you're doing a subject to transaction.
Yeah. And I think my understanding is a lot of investors doing the the creative things with sub twos are using an estate planning tool as a way to have anonymity, but which we'll talk about in, near the end, like that will likely be going away here soon anyways. So, we talked about sub two, and let's see, we also talked about some seller financing stuff. But let's talk about this from when we're talking about seller financing, some of the other things that can get sticky when people are negotiating these things, the seller financing piece. People want seller financing, right? Because again, it's an opportunity for a buyer to not have to pay 6-7% interest potentially, and to be able to negotiate every single aspect of the terms with that seller. You can negotiate price, you can negotiate interest rate, you can negotiate the term, you can negotiate amortization, balloon payment, all the things. Whereas like with a mortgage, it's, you don't really get much of a choice. So that's the advantage to a buyer with a seller finance deal is like, you might be able to get some terms that a lender would never give you. So that, we see a lot of folks looking for these types of deals. So I feel like we covered contract for deed. I think I had this wrong in here, but whatever. Judgments. But this is, I think, the piece that is, pretty important, which is that all terms are negotiable and there's no boilerplate contracts. And then that gets us to prepayment penalties, note collection and tracking, and other issues. So one of you want to take on some of these juicy topics?
I mean, yeah, so prepayment penalties, that's, most people probably seen in a standard type of mortgage to where there is, or not a standard mortgage, but, maybe a hard money lender or, a private money lender to where there is that kind of prepayment penalty. That's always something that can be added into a term to where, if they pay it off within, that's just really for the lender's protection to make sure they're getting some kind of interest paid to the first. Typically what you see is in the first 5 years, if you pay it off sooner, then there's a fee. In year one, it's 5%, and it goes opposite of 1 to 5. So, year two, there's 4%, and then year 4, there's 2% of a penalty of the a loan amount. So that's usually kind of what you see on the prepayment aspect. It could be added into seller financing, but more than likely, if it's a standard loan, usually you don't see those. Very rarely do I see in a conventional type of loan a prepayment penalty. It's more common so in a private or hard money lender to where they have those types of penalties involved.
Yeah. And I agree for the seller carry piece. I would say most of them don't have prepayment penalties.
Yeah. Very rarely do I ever see that.
Yeah.
Commercial lending will have prepayment penalties.
Yes.
Yeah, like we've seen it in DSCR loans. And then for me as a private money lender, when I'm doing loans, I put in like a 3-month minimum. So they have to pay me a minimum of 3 months interest, even if they pay me off in a month or whatever. So that's how that can be negotiated from like a private money type of situation. And then note collection. This is something that I think is interesting for people to know about. Like when you're selling a property on seller financing, unless there is a third party collecting the payments from the buyer and remitting to the seller, either the buyer or the seller has to keep track of how much has been paid, if it was paid on time, all those things, like how much is due if the buyer wants to pay it off. So I think, Sabrina, it'd be great to have you just talk about your experience with note collection and what you see often happen with these seller finance deals.
I get asked a lot about collection escrow companies, and a lot of people think that we can do it, but we don't actually have a collection escrow company. There's actually none in Bend. I refer a lot of people to CNEM Escrow, Evergreen Escrow, Guardian. There's actually so many different collection escrow companies, and I always encourage people to look at their websites, look at their fees. A lot of them have a crazy setup fee. They all have monthly fees. They have additional fees if you want them to track if the payment's late. They have additional fees if you want your note to include reserves, which is your insurance and your taxes. So there's a lot that goes into a company, and some of them are extremely technologically advanced and some of them aren't. So if you enter into one of these transactions and you do want a collection escrow company, which I recommend so you don't have to keep track of it yourself, definitely research the company that you want to use. That being said, if you're going through me, Escrow, to prepare the note and the deed of trust, we also prepare those documents for you as well, depending on we don't tell you what company to go through. I can recommend some, but we will pull and prepare those documents. The great thing is that they hold on to your documents for you. So that fulfillment deed or that original note and that deed of trust, that's what that company is there for, besides intaking and the payment and giving it to the seller. They are the holder of your original document. So once that loan is paid in full, they're the ones that can get those documents out so that lien can be released off the property, or that deed's recorded to put the end buyer into title. So they're important.
So when we were talking about the contract for deed, which we know is not the, your ideal seller carry term or RICS, but contract for deed, and you do a memorandum of contract where basically it's, signed that the deed is paid off, but it hasn't happened yet. Is the note collection company the one that holds that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So for a contract of sale, the memorandum of contract is recorded on the date of closing. That's essentially the buyer's security on the property so that the seller can't do something, sell it, refi it without that buyer being notified. That's immediately recorded. The fulfillment deed is the document that's held with the collection escrow company so that when the buyer is done paying off the seller, that deed then gets recorded to put the buyer into title.
And traditionally, the collection company will also hold the contract itself.
Mm-hmm.
The contract itself is not often what's getting recorded because it's going to be a large document full of a lot of terms that you probably don't want the public record to show. And so a memorandum is just as it sounds. It's just a 2-page document that's going to memorialize that something exists between party A and party B. And again, from a title insurance standpoint, that's how we have record notice that there's an encumbrance on the property, and would need to clear it if the property was getting sold.
Got it. Got it. Okay. I just want to open it up. Are there any questions? Because this is sort of technical. Has anyone ever done one of these? Anyone in the room done a contract of sale, contract for deed, land contract? No. Okay. All right.
I'll say something about, seller financing in the assumption and subject to world, because again, contract's bad. But one thing that we care about from a title insurance standpoint, or at least Escrow cares about, and this is a rule in Oregon. I don't know if it is with other title companies outside the state, or other title companies in the state, but if a loan is being assumed and it's a government-backed loan like FHA, VA, HUD, USDA, oftentimes we cannot insure those transactions. And one of the reasons is because of the due on sale clause. That's one aspect. But we actually would be reported by the government, and then in a sense, and this is a very rudimentary way of putting it, but blacklisted from doing future transactions with those government transactions. And so if we see a subject to transaction that involves one of these government backed loans, which some of them do, we have to say we can't touch it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue it, doesn't mean it wouldn't be still a good financing or investment opportunity, but we've got some at least First American rules around that.
Got it. Okay. That's helpful to know. Okay, well, let's move on to a couple of things that you all see that derail or delay investor closings. We had a few examples, but yeah, just you want to take this one, Rick?
Yeah. So I know earlier, you guys had mentioned it's similar in North Carolina with heir affidavits. South Carolina does not allow heir affidavits. So something that I see a lot of the time, just between individuals that are over here and they, maybe work in North Carolina a lot, they want to buy a property in South. Unfortunately, in South Carolina, it's kind of nice on the title side of things, but you always have to probate estates. So in North Carolina, there is that 2-year period. So if somebody dies outside of 2 years, you can use an heir affidavit. That's kind of that time for the creditors to come forward. So you have to probate within that 2-year period. But outside of that, you can use an heir affidavit coupled with an obituary to prove who the individuals are that own the property. So in North Carolina, that property transfers automatically to the heirs. Whereas in South Carolina, the property is owned by the estate of the individual. So you have to probate the estate. Even if, so all the way up to 10 years, you have to do a full probate. If they died outside of 10 years, you still have to go to court and get what's called a court order to determine the heirs. And that is how it's essentially an heir affidavit, but just with a lot more backing that the court approves of everything. And they say, these are the heirs of the individuals. So, that's something that I run into a lot. That kind of just can blow up a transaction is somebody that comes into South Carolina, somebody died. Oh, hey, we got these heir affidavits right here. Unfortunately, that doesn't work. Or, they get in touch with somebody who, their dad died 15 years ago and they've been, paying the taxes. They think that paying the taxes means they own the property. Sadly, it does not. And, they have to still go and get that court order to determine the heirs. And then they might have like 7 siblings that they then think should not have an interest because they've been the only one paying the taxes on the property. So a lot of things like that, essentially really just as on the investor side of things, making sure everything lines up with when you go to purchase and getting as much information as you can to present to either your escrow officer or attorney to where they have the information they need to complete that title search and make sure it is clear title. I mean, we have a lot of them to where they'll send us that information. And unfortunately, there's 5 other individuals that need to sign. And nobody knew about that for the entire time.
Wow.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest takeaways, like Rick is bringing it up, like understand the nuance of the state you're doing investments in, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, the legal concepts are all pretty similar, but every state is just very different and unique with how its statutes work and function. And it's going to have an impact on, what happens on the tail end of your transaction, especially with a contract.
Most definitely. Yeah. I think just knowing somebody that's, well-versed in that state is probably the best thing to do. If you're doing something in there that's unique to something you've not done in that state before, or going into a new state, just having somebody that knows the laws and the procedures for that state, something that can be incredibly beneficial. That's not going to blow something up last minute for you.
Yeah. And I think just, listening to this whole discussion today, it brings up so many other people you need to have on your team, right? Like estate planning is so important in how you decide to take title and what's going to happen to your property down the road. So that's another teammate that we'll be bringing in to talk to this group as well, because it's important to figure out that ahead of time before you get to the closing table, and that's what it says here is if you're going to last minute switch to a trust or an LLC, it's not too late, but it's pretty late to be deciding that when you're, just about to close. So, that's important, figuring out financing, all the contracts, all these things, it's all interconnected, especially at this point in the transaction when you are going to sign the documents, pay your money, and, take title to a property. So
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, for the on the side of the estate planning, that's a great point to make sure you have somebody like that. I mean, just as an example, the difference in North and South. North Carolina is a marital interest state, so if you and your wife take title as husband and wife, the survivor of the two automatically gets 100% interest in that property. Whereas in South Carolina, it doesn't matter if you take as husband and wife, there's no marital interest. So you would have to own that property as joint tenants with right of survivorship, and they need very specific language on the deed to make that happen. And if you don't have that, we have a lot of individuals that we see from the purchase in the 90s that, maybe that attorney back then didn't tell them they needed that. And unfortunately, they think, oh, me and my husband own this property for, 30 years. I'm the only one that has to sign. Unfortunately, you got to probate that dead spouse's estate, and the kids then have to sign if they didn't have a will for the, the intestacy statute. So, having all that in place and knowing kind of what needs to happen is very important.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this topic we started at the beginning, just kind of teasing FINCEN. Please tell us what this means. What does FINCEN stand for?
In layman's terms, I can't. It's like federal. Do you know what the actual acronym stands for? It sounds scary. It's like there's the word crime in there. You don't really know what it means to stand for. It's essentially the way the government is. They're utilizing escrow companies and title companies to assist in help finding people who are trying to launder money. So for transactions that come through any title company, it's every single title company has to deal with this. If your buyer is a trust or an LLC, they automatically get an email that they have to fill out this 8-page questionnaire with what they're doing with the property, what their social is, how much they're paying. Essentially, they just ask a bunch of personal questions. And once that questionnaire is completed, then sellers are also asked questions. Once all those questions are completed, you're done. It's done. But it's a new thing that's going to be coming out. We've already rolled it out because we have closings happening in March with LLCs and trusts. And so it's just I feel like I talk like I'm talking to real estate agents, but you guys will have to know that your buyers are going to come to you and be like, what is this? Why am I getting this questionnaire? And it's because of this whole thing.
Yeah, and FinCEN's been around for a long time. It's just now there's a new regulatory requirement of reporting that is effective March 1st, and it's massive. It's massive, sweeping.
Have the requirements changed since they first rolled it out on a wide scale about 2 years ago?
Yes. Yeah, I mean first off, I'm not an expert on FinCEN, so I have to be careful here. But the changes that have come out now are very impactful on every single transaction that we have, as opposed to before. It used to be more geographically targeted. So in Oregon, a lot of places in Oregon, we didn't quite have to worry about certain aspects of it. And now it is almost every transaction is going to be impacted by it.
So if I went and registered a couple of years ago, all my LLCs and got FinCEN numbers, do I have to go back and run through the system again, or am I okay? You said.
I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that question.
No, so essentially what the reporting is, from my understanding at least, I looked it up, by the way, I don't know what it is, but it's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. That's FINCEN. I did not know that off the top of my head, but I looked it up. But from my understanding, so essentially it's so that way the government knows like pretty much everything about the trust, who had anybody that has any kind of interest in an LLC or a trust. They want an EIN number, where you're getting your funds from. Sometimes you don't have to, it may not be required, at least from my understanding, is if there's a lender that already has anti-money laundering systems in place. So let's say you're getting a loan with Wells Fargo and they have all those systems in place. They're already checking you all for that. But in a situation in which, you know, you're getting a private money lender that doesn't have that in place, that private money lender also has to have, they have to find out where those funds are coming from. So there's pretty much everybody involved in that transaction has to be reported through to that FinCEN to know where money's coming from, where's it going, how much, and everything.
Interesting. Okay, so what's your prediction, Rick, for using land trusts to?
Yeah, I don't think like a land trust. I just don't think that you'll see those. Your standard, as they were saying, those revocable trusts. You know, that will be something that's still continued to be used because at the end of the day, that's more for estate planning to avoid the probate process, everything like that. Your standard LLCs. You know, people that just buy and sell through that LLC, they're not gonna have an issue with it because, you know, at the end of the day, they've more than likely purchased with some kind of lender before. So they've already gone through that process of the anti-money laundering things. So it's just going to be a matter of they'll have to complete that at each closing. And they've done it with every time they've had a lender. So it's not going to be a big deal. It's going to be more for your individuals that maybe set up an LLC for each type of, or each home that they have. They have a different LLC for, or they have 7 LLCs for different batches of homes. Those are the individuals that are probably going to be annoyed through this process. But at the end of the day, is what it is. It goes into place and you got to report it over.
And so basically,
I'm sorry, I don't know if but on our end, it's only if you're paying cash. So if you're getting a like normal loan, they don't have to go through the onboarding process.
Yep, correct. I think it's only if that lender though has the anti-money laundering systems in place. There are, for example, like a hard money lender or a private money lender. Those individuals you still have to report to, and you have to know where the money's coming from the lender.
And I'll also say just to sell First American Title, we've got a great system in place for it. We've got a reporting system that it's essentially beep, boop, beep. You punch in the information and it's going to ultimately tell you like, do you need to proceed and report or do you not? And I think it's going to be great for everyone.
Yeah.
So is this the end of investor anonymity?
I mean, from the government standpoint, possibly. I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to know it all. So, they get to know all the information. You're not going to be able to hide anything from them.
Yeah, and I'm wearing my tin hat saying, and I'm the government always known what's going on, like, you know.
Big Brother's coming in on this one, and they're going to.
But yeah, they'll be more knowledgeable. It'll be harder to hide, at least from the government. Maybe not the public record, right? Maybe not going to change.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know we covered a lot of topics really quickly today, so I just want to make sure we answer any questions in the room, virtual or physical room. Questions about sub-2, seller financing, buying in a trust, how to take title. Anything else?
No, I thought everyone did a really great job explaining things. I think it was just really clear. We had great speakers. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we did record this as well. So for our speakers, I'll send you the recording. You can share with folks. And then one thing I did neglect to mention at the beginning, we do have a chat online on the Google Meet here. So, we do want this to be a community and for people to connect outside of this space. So, Rick, I'm going to pop your contact info in the chat as well. Sabrina, I'll do yours also. Here, I'll just go to your little pages here. So I'll give you guys some time here to write down some phone numbers and I'll pop this into our chat as well. And then anyone on the call, you are always welcome to pop your information in the chat so that you can connect with anybody else in the room that maybe is doing something you want to do or is someone you want to meet and learn from in the future. That's our goal here, is, like Sarah said at the beginning, to create community, foster that community, help each other, you know, with the ultimate goal. Like, we invest in real estate so that we can do the things we want to do and be where we want to be. So that's the ultimate goal, and we're here to help you guys do that in any way that we can. And we want you all to be able to help each other. We because we're learning always, but we don't know it all. So Rick, are you comfortable with your personal phone number going out here?
That comes, so that's my
Okay.
personal line through my firm, to where it comes to my phone directly through Ring Central. So that way I know that it's for work and it's not a potential spam, and I just ignore it. So if it comes through there, I will answer.
Perfect. All right.
And that's my cell phone, so you guys can always text me.
Perfect. And we do a lot. All right, Sabrina, I'll get yours in there. Okay, I'm doing so many things. It's at the same time. Okay, and then here's Rick's page. This again is that same QR code. If you want to hop on his website, if you're thinking of buying or selling in lovely North and South Carolina, where it rarely snows, but it did last week. All right. Sabrina, okay, will you just read me your phone number so I can pop it in the chat?
Mine, 541-788-8678.
Oh, I missed the first ones. What?
541-788-8678.
Well, I don't know if it's going to go in. I think I'm having connectivity issues. Surprise, surprise. Okay, there we go. Got it. Okay, well, thank you all for joining us today. Everyone in the physical room, you're welcome to hang out for a bit and socialize and network. And for those of us online, I'm going to stop our meeting and just want to say thank you again to all of our wonderful speakers and for all of you for showing up.
Thank you, Suzanne and Sarah and everyone.
Thank you.
That was great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.